That was Farewell to Whiskey by way of introduction to a wee history of Niel Gow, father of Scottish Fiddle music, and also just a few of his tunes while we go. The background of that tune was that it was inspired by real events. About the 1790s, at some point there was a terrible wheat summer and just a general crop failure, which meant that grain was at a premium to feed the population. So distilling and making of whiskey was banned because famine was a realistic fear. So Niel wrote this because there was going to be no whiskey that year. Following year was better and whiskey was allowed again, so he wrote Welcome Whiskey Back Again. But he's a remarkable figure, historic figure really, and like I said, regarded as the father of Scottish fiddle music. Niel was born in 1727 in Strathbran in Highland Perthshire. And on his mother's side, descended from a lineage of harpers. So that's more than likely where he got his musical genius from. His mother was Catherine McEwen. She married John Gow, who was a plaid weaver. And he more than likely wove the plaids from wool that Catherine had spun. At the time, Strathbran, which as I said was in Highland Perthshire, was almost 100% Gaelic speaking, even as late as 1891 in the census. Most of the population spoke Gaelic. Find that would be very different now, I would imagine. In 1745, Niel famously won a fiddle competition open to all of Scotland. He had received fiddle tuition from John Cameron, but it's thought that an awful lot of his playing was self-taught, but he certainly got some pretty good grounding in the first place. The competition open to the whole of Scotland was judged by a blind man called John McCraw, and Niel duly won that competition. McCraw famously stating that he could have told Niel's bow amongst 100 fiddle players. Later that same year, Niel played for Bonnie Prince Charlie at Dunkeld House, but it was ill-fated 1745 Jacobite rebellion to try and regain the British crown for his father. He obviously was a very charismatic figure, it's often written about that, and Niel duly joined up and joined the Jacobites only as far as Lunkerty, apparently. That's for the here anyway. And he then walked him, which is probably just as real because he survived. Yeah, just to tell the tale, but write some of our finest fiddle music. In 1750, Niel got married to his first wife, Margaret Wiseman, and they lived at Inver, where he would spend his entire life. And he started off as a hand-loom linen weaver. Children duly came along, first William, then John, Andrew, Margaret, Griselle, Nathaniel and Daniel. Griselle and Daniel both died in infancy, sadly. But the boys, they all learnt the fiddle. I can't speak for the girls because I've never seen any written evidence that they played. Maybe it was seen as being unseemly for a girl to learn the fiddle, but the boys all played, became good players, notably Nathaniel, and they all apparently learnt on a kit fiddle taught by their father. Nathaniel eventually was sent to get lessons from Red Rob McIntosh, a great player and composer, Niel's greatest competitor in his day, and then Alexander King McGlashan. So he'd been quite an accomplished player, was Nathaniel. By this point, Niel was being paid £5 a year to play at social events and family entertainments for the third Duke of Atholl. He was also teaching fiddle. How many pupils he had, I really couldn't say, but one of his pupils was John Crerar. He was a young gamekeeper for the Duke of Atholl, and he'd be regarded as a great player in his own right, and composed the excellent reel The Marks of Tullybarton, which I'm going to play. I may have to stop and tune up from time to time. I may have to stop and tune up, so if there's pauses in this, it's because I'm trying to get this fiddle into tune. It's quite calm in this space here in Migby Kirk, and this fiddle, you have to tune it with the pegs apart from the E string, so it's a wee bit temperamental because it's not played, it's not like a fiddle has been played very often. Okay, so I think we'll maybe stop here and get a proper tune up. And we're back. So Marks of Tullybarton, I think any teacher would be proud of a pupil that could produce a tune like that. So Niel, he would increasingly be engaged for bookings further and further afield. His fame was spreading across the country, and he was asked to play at hunt balls in Cooper in Perth, at events in Abercairn, Achtertyre and Crieff. And ultimately he'd become such a well-respected figure that any really notable society events such as balls in the assembly rooms in Edinburgh weren't considered complete unless Niel Gow was present. So I'm going to play another couple of his tunes now. First is Highland Whiskey, then one of Scotland's best kent jigs, The Stool of Repentance. I'm trying to keep myself right. I've got a few notes written down to keep my thread going in the right direction. As a player, Niel was famous for the power of his upstroke, and for quite a long time it was considered that this was actually referring to the updriven bow, which is a uniquely Scottish bow stroke used within the playing of Strathspeys. It gives you a real lift and drive to the music. I would imagine it was something that if he did come up with that, which there's no reason to think he didn't, it was something to kind of encourage lift for the dancers were playing. So, I mean, just to demonstrate, he was very fond of Tulloch Goran, a great tune. It's an updriven bow. Probably it plays, it's a snap bow, down up, played at the tip, and then 3 ups. Between the second and third up, you smartly lift the bow up, catch it at the heel before returning for the next note. So it takes a bit of practice, because it takes a bit of commitment but accuracy at the same time. So, but it adds a lot. Kind of just adds what the old boys used to describe as gur, which actually is a Scots word for with drive and force. So plenty of gur required in the playing the updriven bow. He was actually a player with a massive amount of stamina. Now I would be thinking I've had enough of it after about 3 or 4 hours. This is an account of Niel Gow playing from the Duke of Athol's sister. Her name was Mary Graham, and she describes the celebration at Dunkeld to mark the Duke's birthday. When darkness fell, a bonfire was lit on the river, following which the people of Dunkeld set off fireworks, and several houses in the town were illuminated. After supper, there was singing, followed by dancing. Niel Gow and his brother played incessantly for upwards of 12 hours. Quite amazing, really. His brother would have been his brother Donald, and there's a couple of paintings, a Donald and Niel playing at events. So they would have been very close, and indeed Niel wrote a beautiful tune on the death of his brother Donald, and this is just got Niel Gow's lamentation on the death of his brother Donald. tune. The fiddle's going out of tune again. Well, anyway, there's another account of Niel. It was left by a young Elizabeth Grant, a Rothy Marcus. Young girl at the time, but something that she never forgot, and she said, "On this journey I first remember old Niel Gow being sent for to play to us at the inn at Inver. Not Dunkeld, that little village we passed through and went on to the ferry at Inver, the stream full, deep and dark. I don't know whether this did not make more impression on me than did Niel Gow's delightful violin, that it had overexcited me, and my father had to take me a little walk by the riverside in the moonlight before I was rational enough to be left to sleep." So she was obviously a bit excitable about hearing Niel playing. So I'm going to play another couple of tunes. It's Strathspey and a reel. This is Miss Drummond of Perth, Strathspey and reel. Great tunes. Margaret Wiseman sadly died at Inver in 1766, but in 1768 Niel remarried, and his second wife, that was also Margaret, but her name was Margaret Uckert, and she came from Perth. Margaret would die in 1805, and despite it being a childless union, Margaret had been a faithful companion and was really a soulmate to Niel, and had brought up his motherless children. And when she died, he was absolutely grief-stricken. He'd be inspired to compose perhaps his best known tune, Niel Gow's Lament for the Death of his Second Wife. Kent's Scottish airs. Fiddle was going out of tune there. So, Niel was famously visited in 1787 by the most famous Scot of all, arguably, Scotland's national bard, Robert Burns, as part of Burns's tour of the Highlands. He'd actually made a considerable detour to come and visit Niel Gow, such was his fame. And he left a description, which is rather nice actually, and it kind of backs up the famous Sir Henry Raeburn portraits of Niel. It says, he was a short, stout-built, honest Highland figure, with his greyish hair shed on his honest social brow, an interesting face marking strong sense, kind, open-heartedness, mixed with unmistrusting simplicity. They shared a few drams at the cottage at Inver, and Niel played a few tunes. Some were requested. He requested Niel Gow's Lamentation for James Murray, Esquire of Abercairnie, and Loch Ericht, which was one of Niel's compositions, sometimes known as Ericht Side, and Burns would later set lyrics to it, to the song addressed to the woodlark. So I'll play that tune, it's rather nice. This is Niel Gow's Loch Ericht. Tune. Burns also set one of his most famous lyrics actually to Gow's music. His most famous of all actually, My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose. Now it's got a better Kent melody now, but originally Burns set it to Major Graham of Inchbrakie, and I actually prefer it, to be honest, but I'll let you hear it. beautiful tune. If I thought it'd be great to have been part of that meeting, one of our greatest fiddlers meeting up with our greatest poet, but there was accounts left, so there's a couple of tunes that were definitely played. Loch Ericht was one, as I said, Niel Gow's Lamentation for James Murray. Another one he played, it was a great favourite of Gow's, it was Macintosh's Lament, which is a pibroch by the 1700s. There was a fiddle version of that, but the old pibroch, which was written probably about 1520 on the death of the 14th chief of the Macintoshes, Lachlan Macintosh, is a really beautiful tune, and it's considered to be probably the initial inspiration for Dvorak's New World Symphony, that first bit. If I let you hear the fiddle version. You can hear the first little motif of that. That came from the original piping version. So that's the original pibroch version, which is supposed to have been based on Macintosh's bereaved bride's lamentation over his corpse. They couldn't get her dragged away from the body, and she just kept crooning or keening would be maybe the word, hour and hour this melody, and indeed walked to the graveside, tapping on the coffin as she sang it until his body was lowered, and that was the only time they could get her away. And the piper for the chief had composed it based on the melody of the grieving bride on her wedding day. So anyway, that's a different story. The other tune that Niel famously really liked was Greg's Strathspey, and the description is that he was visibly moved whenever he heard the tune, so it was something that really got to him. I'll just let you hear a bit of that. And it goes on. Great tune. They play that often nowadays, but it's great to be able to play a tune like that that Niel probably played in this fiddle. That's kind of how I like thinking about it anyway. But it's as close as you can get to the man himself, really, apart from visiting his grave. So we're getting near the end. Appropriately, Niel died just more or less a couple of years after his wife Margaret. He died in 1807, and he was interred at Littleton Kirkyard near Inver. A handsome memorial stone was erected, but it ultimately ended up being moved to the grave and put up to Dunkeld Cathedral because souvenir hunters were chipping bits off of the gravestone for little bits. and it was becoming quite badly damaged. So it was moved and a new stone was erected, and that handsome stone is there to this day. Niel's regarded as the father of Scottish fiddle music. Great influential figure, but a kind of modest, down-to-earth man with a lot of character, a lot of wit, and very much at ease with anybody, regardless of whether it was a cotter farmer or the Duke of Atholl. His last tune was a tune that was written just about the time that the Dunkeld Bridge was begun. Niel died before its completion, but he started writing this tune, indeed he finished writing this tune while it was being started, and it's called Dunkeld Bridge. I hope I've got the right key. Well, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little presentation on Niel Gow, a brief history, brief summary of his life, and a few anecdotes and a few of his tunes. He wrote over 80 tunes, so there's obviously much more that you can look at. I recorded them all, they're on YouTube. If you want to look, you can hear every one of them that I could find. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it, and that's a wee bit on the life of Niel Gow, the father of Scottish fiddle music.